Last week, I looked at the impact a pipeline installation could have on farmland in the Midwest if constructed. But what if in the years after, especially if there's a leak or rupture? What long-term impact could that have on the land? I spoke to a soil and land expert to find out. The two carbon capture pipelines in the works from Summit Carbon Solutions and Navigator CO2 Ventures will carry pressurized carbon dioxide hundreds of miles across 6 states. While the technology for these pipeline infrastructures has advanced and improved, a rupture is always a possibility.
The consequences to the land agricultural production-wise and contamination-wise afterwards is a bit unknown because there's not much research done on that specific type of spill. Finding it in the literature is incredibly hard if it even exists. But there's a few things that we can expect for when that happens.
Aaron Dye is a land and soil expert who has studied pipeline ruptures and the impact they can have on the land.
You would expect whatever zone that supercritical carbon spread out in the ground is likely stripping out some of the nutrients and fertility of that ground too. And so in addition to that microbial part, you would see a reduction in productivity, or that's what you would expect to occur.
Supercritical carbon refers to the pressurized carbon dioxide that will be carried in these pipelines. This CO2 is not really a liquid, not really a gas. It's kind of in between, sharing properties with both states.
One of the things too is that when a rupture occurs in these supercritical states, because of the pressure suddenly changes, the temperature drops dramatically. So it will essentially flash freeze the ground around it, which is a hazard in itself if you're close by it, but it also jeopardizes more of that. It makes the rupture larger.
Let's back up a bit. Carbon dioxide itself isn't considered a contaminant. It's in the soil, it's in the air we breathe, but it's when you get it in a high concentration that it can turn toxic, even deadly.
The pressure, when it gets released, it can cause that supercritical carbon dioxide to enter into the ground and spread a particular distance. The longer that the rupture hasn't been, or the pressure hasn't been turned off of the pipeline, the larger and the wider that's going to get.
And not just for humans.
One of the things is that because of that extreme temperature shift, the biology is going to respond to that. In a lot of these areas, the ground freezes during the winter, but the degree of freezing is very different than the temperature change that you would see from a pipeline break.
So what happens when a carbon dioxide pipeline ruptures or leaks? How big of an area could be impacted? Dye says it depends on how long it takes to notice it. He points to an oil pipeline rupture in North Dakota as an example.
Maybe a 1/4-inch diameter hole, either from corrosion or something else in a pipeline occurred, and it wasn't noticed until the product that was going through it was actually ponding on the surface. So it not only moved down in the ground, but it built up and then ponded above it. So it took a while to even notice.
The aftermath of that rupture lasted years.
Just the remediation process to dig out the contaminated sediment that went down about 60 feet over about 70 acres. The remediation process just to clean it up and to put the ground back took about 6 years to occur and costs approaching $100 million.
While that's worst case scenario, Dye says even with a smaller leak, there are things landowners can do.
Something that I would recommend to landowners if there was ever a break on the property is that in the site investigation afterwards to see what the disturbed area or contaminated area is, to not look just where the extent of the carbon entered into the ground, but also a little bit beyond it. Give it another 20, 30, 40 feet worth of sampling to see, because whatever was in the zone that carbon moved through, that supercritical carbon dioxide, whatever it stripped out, it's going to deposit wherever it stopped moving at.
Tomorrow, I wrap up my Along the Route series right here on Siouxland News at 9. If you missed any of my Along the Route pieces or just want to see them again, visit this story now on SiouxlandNews.com.